Alright, what's up, guys? So, Dynasty Warriors Origins had just recently dropped a little update. Kind of fixes some bugs, but also dropped a photo mode, which was actually pretty cool. Kind of makes for some good thumbnails, like the one I'm going to quickly show you here of a little image I took just kind of playing around with it. Actually turned out to be a pretty cool image, and also be the thumbnail for this video. And then, of course, the second part of this update was they dropped a new set of armor called Lion Dragon Armor. You don't have to work for it or anything. You'll just log into the game after you update the game, and it'll give you that piece of armor. It's actually pretty cool. It's very reminiscent of some of the older Dynasty Warriors titles. Like, I can't put my hand on it. I mean, I could just quickly Google it, but trying to go from memory, it's kind of very reminiscent of, or not reminiscent, but it almost kind of looks like an amalgamation of the armor Zhao Yun wore from Dynasty Warriors 3 and Dynasty Warriors 4. The only difference is that in Dynasty Warriors 4, I distinctly remember Zhao Yun had a sleeveless arm, not a full set of armor. But it looks just like it. I kind of like it. Has kind of like an old school look to it. It looks kind of not modern in terms of graphical fidelity. The armor kind of does actually look a little bit old, and that's fine. It does kind of give you that nostalgia feeling. At least for those of you who have actually played a ton of the Dynasty Warriors titles. What I wanted to do with this video really quick was I wanted to talk about what should we expect from Dynasty Warriors moving forward. Now, Origins is actually a spin-off series that features an actual storyline within the main setting of Dynasty Warriors, the main setting of the Romance of the Three Kingdoms period. The difference being, we're not playing as one of the famous generals. We're not playing as Liu Bu or Zhang Fei, Guan Yu, Sun Jian, Sun Ce, Zhou Yu. We're not playing any of those. Instead, you're playing, the Wanderer. The kind of premise behind it is you get to choose a faction towards the later half of the game. And, of course, it all culminates within the Battle of Chirbi. And Battle of Chirbi, actually, it's after that battle, that's when it actually establishes, at least from a historical standpoint, Chirbi establishes the three kingdoms. So throughout the course of the battle, I mean, a lot of it has to deal with the Yellow Turban Rebellion, Dong Zhuo's tyranny, the rise and fall of Dong Zhuo. And then chapter 3, kind of more of like a filler type chapter, I would call it. Not necessarily a whole lot going on as far as major story that connects lore-wise to the actual historical accuracies of the Three Kingdoms period, or at least the pre-Three Kingdoms period. So I always consider chapter 3 as kind of just like filler episodes, and it's more or less to kind of establish the Lone Wanderer rather than establish the other factions. I mean, I kind of like the way they did it because, again, if you're a veteran Dynasty Warriors fan like I am, then you've seen the development of relations between certain officers and their faction over and over and over. A lot of times, well, not a lot of times, actually in every single Dynasty Warriors games, I think but I think it started at Dynasty Warriors 5, they started diving into a lot more filler battles and just like a whole bunch of filler cutscenes that weren't really needed. But a lot of it was just to kind of establish characters and relations between each general or something like that. I think Dynasty Warriors 8 actually kind of went overboard with that. There's a lot of filler in Dynasty Warriors 8, which is why it's such a big game. There's so much in there that honestly is not needed. And in Origins, that's what I consider chapter 3. There is a lot of filler stuff, but all the story elements, all the story points is all about the player character's backstory, why he has amnesia, why he can't remember anything and such. And, of course, figuring out which faction you want to serve. And then when you get to Chapter 4, that's basically when you make your decision. Although what's kind of strange is throughout Chapter 3, and this is what I find really strange about the faction choices, is when you're first introduced to Liu Bei and Cao Cao, as well as Sun Jian, they're all asking for your help. You can help out Cao Cao or Liu Bei, but you'll be locked out of helping one of the other factions. So if you help Liu Bei, you're going to be locked out of helping Cao Cao. And if you help Cao Cao, vice versa, you'll be locked out of helping Liu Bei. That's not going to happen with Wu or Sun Ji. I'll just refer to it as Wu. So that's what's really strange is right from the get-go, you're going to be locked out of serving either Wei or Shu. I don't know why they had it done like that, because of course you have to help every single faction a few times depending on what they need. So I think Wei you only need to help them out once, and then you're basically established with them up until chapter 4. But with Wu and Shu, you actually do have to help them out a few times before you can actually gain the option to join them in chapter 4. So I find that kind of strange. The other strange thing too is you're eventually locked out of helping or assisting with Wu when you're still basically freelance. You're still a mercenary pretty much, and you're only helping Cao Cao. But Cao Cao and Sun Jian, Wei and Wu, they never have any interactions at all. You never battle them once in throughout Chapter 3 and Chapter 4, or at least up until, Chirbi and all that. But the entirety of Chapter 3, you are never helping Cao Cao fight Wu. So that is kind of strange, and yet you're still locked out from helping Wu at all. So I don't know why they had it done like that. It is a questionable decision considering so early on you're locked out from Cao Cao or Liu Bei, but not Wu. But anyway, as that kind of progresses into Chapter 4, that's when the story kind of goes back on track, and it's less about the Wanderer and more about the factions themselves, what their ambitions are, why they're choosing to do this and that. Makes the choices feel a bit more meaningful, depending on who you like. I've always been a Wu guy, so that's why my playthrough I chose Wu. And of course, I kind of like the color red. And of course, when it comes to the historical facts, the historical accuracies, Wu was the final faction to actually withstand the Three Kingdoms period. Wei's internal strife from the eventual formation of the Kingdom of Jin, they actually fell after Kingdom of Shu, which was many years actually later after Shu fell. So Wu was always the strongest of the three factions, although Wu still had its own problems and is still caved into the political turmoil. And there's a whole lot of political debate that was happening within Wu that forced the faction to basically splinter. Best example to describe it is like what's happening here in Washington with the orange buffoon and such like that. That's what happened with Wu pretty much. As far as moving forward with Dynasty Warriors Origins and the story, I would like to see the DLC continue at possibly up until Wuzhang Plains. But if that happens with Wuzhang, there's there's many years between between Battle Chirbi and Battle Wuzhang Plains. Battle Wuzhang Plains, why that's a significant battle, is it's basically the downfall of Shu. Shu loses the battle, Zhuge Liang passes away, Jiang Wei he succeeds Zhuge Liang, but he doesn't do as well, although he still tried his best. But a lot of the political and strife that Shu was facing eventually forced them to surrender to Wei. I would like to see kind of it go that way, but that kind of leads you to wonder how the Wanderer story ends. Does the Wanderer story end at some point before the Three Kingdoms? Does it end at some point after the Three Kingdoms? Although it's kind of hard to say if his story ends after Three Kingdoms, because at the time when Wu fell and led the way for the Kingdom of Jin and the Jin Dynasty, that was about 75 years, and I don't think the Wanderer ever lived that long. I mean, no one back then in ancient China lived very long. I think you'd be lucky enough to live to see 40 years old. Although if I remember my history right, Sun Quan actually lived to be a senior. So he was actually the oldest general, so to speak, the oldest character within the Three Kingdoms to actually live the longest. Everyone else died at a young age, either from disease or in battle or just natural causes. So I don't know how the Lone Wanderer story would end. If they actually do go forward with a sequel to Origins, I don't know how that exactly will work. Although, to be frank, if they don't do a major DLC or like an expansion for Origins that continues right after the Battle of Chirbi, you're dealing with the aftermath. Maybe like Chapter 6 is just dealing with the aftermath of Battle of Chirbi. Chapter 7 could actually go into the actual formation of the Three Kingdoms, and then you're helping out whoever it is you're serving with kind of finalize their kingdom by taking the last bit of territory here and there. So there is a whole lot to do there, and maybe this, like I said, the story could expand up until Wuzhang Plains. Although they're gonna have to kind of go the way of Dynasty Warriors 8, where they had to actually, I mean, even though Dynasty Warriors 8 is it's a fairly large game, there's a lot of battles in Dynasty Warriors 8 that were featured in Dynasty Warriors 6 and 7. Completely new battles. I don't know if they were historical battles or not. There are a lot more historical battles taking place in Dynasty Warriors 6 and 7. Dynasty Warriors 5, if I remember right. Dynasty Warriors 5, there was a couple battles in particular in Dynasty Warriors 5. There was also one in Dynasty Warriors 6, Battle of Hefei Castle. That was actually a pretty fun one in Dynasty Warriors 6. That was a major battle between Wei and Wu. That's actually a pivotal battle for Wu, by the way. They actually lose that battle. It was a siege against this massive castle in Hefei against Wei. They were trying to besiege it, and they tried to do a naval invasion. They did not succeed. I believe that was the final major battle Wu and Wei had before Wei kind of succumbed to the internal strife and all that political turmoil from Jin and some of the antics going on there. Dynasty Warriors Origin, I could also possibly see another spin-off series with the Extreme Legends and the Empires variants. But between the two, I think Extreme Legends is a lot more possible than, or a lot more of a possibility than we ever get to see an Empires variant. Just because in the current time period of Dynasty Warriors Origins, it's pre-Three Kingdoms, basically about, I would say, 70% of the roster that we're all familiar with is not in Origins because they all come in after Battle of Chirbi. Peng Tong, he serves Liu Bei after Battle of Chirbi. Peng Tong is a pivotal character that joins Shu, so we could actually see how his own story unfolds. I mean, he does die not too long after joining Shu from major battle. I can't remember which battle that was, to be frank, but there is a lot more story to tell. Obviously we could also dive into maybe, and I mean maybe, the Empires variant, which it's basically like Total War Three Kingdoms. If you played Total War and are familiar with the political system, the trading, the allies, the betrayals, the playing spy and such like that, and then of course the actual gameplay aspects of Total War Three Kingdoms, basically that. But Dynasty Warriors is a much more faster paced type of gameplay loop compared to Total War Three Kingdoms, which is it's kind of more milsim like. The political aspects of it, all that, the political management system, managing your armies and such, very similar to the Empires variant. And what's also cool about the Empires variant, why it's always been one of my favorites, is you get to choose, you get to create your own character, or you get to choose any one character from the roster, whether it's the main roster or the side roster. The side roster being all the officers, just the generic looking characters like the one you see I'm fighting on screen. Of course, you get to also pick as the anyone from the main roster, all the famous generals. You can either pick to serve a ruler, or you can actually be the ruler yourself, and you don't even have to follow lore, because in Empires, that's basically what it is. You're trying to take control of China. Although there are some aspects, if you meet certain conditions, you can actually do a historical battle that's featured in the mainline series Dynasty Warriors title, so that's pretty cool. So like I said, there's not a whole lot going on with Origins to kind of warrant a Empires variant. We probably wouldn't see an Empires variant until after we potentially see a Dynasty Warriors Origins sequel. I doubt that'll happen because apparently they said the sales were pretty low for Origins. Although granted, the sales were never meant to be that high to begin with. Dynasty Warriors but Dynasty Warriors as a whole, it's a very niche game. Not a whole lot of people like it because it gets very monotonous, very repetitive, very quickly. But that's kind of like the nice thing about Dynasty Warriors. It's not over the top, it's over the top, but it's not overly complex. It's not overly complicated. Very easy to get into. It's not too bad to get to master it. So yeah, that's why it's kind of niche. It'll never blow up to the type of popularity that Warhammer has lately, especially with Space Marine 2. Space Marine 2 just kind of blew up the Warhammer fan base. Unfortunately, Origins really didn't do that. Although Origins still is a good game to dive into if you're new to Dynasty Warriors, there's still plenty of here to actually get you caught up on what Dynasty Warriors is like. I mean, there's still the shrine that you can go to where Peng Tong is at, if you want to read all the lore of all these officers, at least the current officers available anyway. So that's kind of what I wanted to do. And then, of course, the final thing too before I end this video is, if you can, just at least watch, a few minutes of that video I posted the other day talking about, well, it's kind of like a vlog basically, talking about what's been happening lately, why I chose to come back to YouTube, why I'm trying to opt in for YouTube as opposed to disability, because of all the outstanding injuries I have, having to get a hip replacement. It's a lot to go through, and disability is definitely a process. It's not an overnight thing like something like unemployment is. If you could watch that video, just kind of support it, that would help me a lot, just liking the video or something. But anyway, I think for the next couple of weeks, I'll just kind of keep it random up until Space Marine 2 decides to bring the Horde update. They really got to make up for what happened with the Trigon update. the next update for Space Marine 2 actually is supposed to be Horde mode. So we'll probably just kind of randomize the games a bit until then. Kind of add some more variety besides Dynasty Warriors and Warhammer. So, and Marvel Rivals, although. So anyway, we'll see you guys on the next video. Hope you have a good day. And we'll see you then. Bye.